Hey, what's up, guys? How you doing? Sweet. Uh, hey, I'm Zach. I am going to tell a story right now. Thanks for having me. I've been really looking forward to doing the Raconteurs again. I did it in Hamilton a while ago, and then I saw this event, and I was like, oh, man, I'm going to sign up for this event. And now I'm here, which is ideal. I'm glad that ended up that way. And then I heard the theme for the event was gatherings, and I was like, oh, man, perfect. I know what I'll write a story about. I'll write a story about going to church, because I go to church. And then I was like, oh, no, that means I have to talk about going to church in front of a group of people, which makes me very uncomfortable. Because here's the thing. I'm a Christian, but I'm, kind of embarrassed about it, I'm not, embarrassed about my faith or, what I believe, but I'm just, embarrassed to tell people that I'm a Christian, because there's been a lot of shitty things done in the name of Christianity and hatred and bigotry and all of that stuff. And I'm like, no, not me. I didn't do that. But I am a Christian, and but I'm here's the thing. It's I'm too Canadian to be Christian at the same time. Every time I'm a Christian, every time I'm oh, I'm a Christian, I always want to be but not like those kind on TV though, I'm one of the good ones. I think all religions are fine, and I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm sorry to believe something in front of you. But it's true. I am, and I'm not half-assing it either. I'm fully in. I'm going to church every Sunday, and I'm on committees, and I am Christian as fuck. That's how Christian I am. But I kind of fell ass backwards into it, It's I went through this very spiritual exploration stage where I went to Buddhist temples, and I read the Bhagavad Gita, and I went to mosque, and I went to India to practice yoga, and I was doing yoga 5 times a week. And then I was oh, I'm spiritual but not religious, which I still don't even understand what that means. But I think it just means that I smoked weed and read an Eckhart Tolle book one time. That's the gist of that. So I was going through this whole spiritual exploration phase, and then one day I was at a coffee shop, and I was talking to the lady at the coffee shop about God, and then she's like, what do you think about Jesus? And then I'm like, he seems cool, I guess. I don't know. I got no problems with him on the top. And then she's like, oh, I go to this church. You should come check it out sometime. And then, first of all, I was amazed that anybody still went to church. I thought that was over. I thought the only people going to church were old people hedging their bets before they died and people who haven't figured out the internet yet. I thought that was the only people left going to church. But I was like, sure, why not? I'll go to church. That seems weird. I'm sure it'll be very funny. And also it was kind of our generation, it's if something is lame and then you do it kind of ironically, it becomes cool. I was oh, I'll go to church ironically. I'll be able to go to cool places and be I go to church. And they'll be oh, you're so different. So I started going to this church, and it was really great. And the church was called Eucharist, and it was sort of centered around the idea. And the idea of Eucharist is another word for communion. And the idea of this place was that they had this sort of open table policy. So Eucharist and communion is supposed to be this gift from God of grace and forgiveness and eternal love forever of all time. And you can all just come and get it. And it was open table, so everybody was invited. And this church was full of all of these, there were a lot of queer people there, and there were a lot of marginalized people there, and just weirdos, and it was amazing. I loved it. It was the most beautiful thing. Everybody there was a little bit fucked up, and that's my people. I only want to be around people that are a little bit fucked up. And here's the thing. I think that everybody is a little bit fucked up. I think we're all just these people were honest about it, I'd seen some churches, and they sing these songs, and they're oh, God loves us, and we love God, blah, 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 blah. And then this church was all the songs are Lord, we're having a tough time. And I was all right, these are my people. Let's do this. So I started going to this church every Sunday, and I wouldn't have identified as a Christian, but it was a really good place, and there were all these weird people there, and I was having a great time, and I was getting to know what it was about. And then I had this one big shift. So one Sunday, I went to church, and we were doing a baby dedication. And what a baby dedication is in The Lion King, at the beginning, when Rafiki takes Simba and like holds him up on the rock. That's what a baby dedication is. We did that shit for real. So like, you know, he holds him up and then it's essentially like we take a baby, a new baby. Well, I guess all babies are new babies. That's the thing about babies. And we go and we're like, hey, God, love this baby. And then God's like, done. And then we're like, hey, parents, love this baby. And the parents are like, sure. And then we take it to like this whole community and everybody stands up and it's like, hey, community, love this baby. And we're like, we're going to love the shit out of that baby. And it's this beautiful thing. So one day I went and we were doing a baby dedication for this couple, Emily and Stacy, who just had a child. And it was one of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen in my entire life. It was all these people gathered together and we're dedicating ourselves to loving the shit out of this baby. And Emily and Stacy were a lesbian couple, obviously, which I thought like to see them standing at the front of a Christian church was like very encouraging. So it was this beautiful thing. And I'm like almost like on the verge of like tears of joy as this is happening. And then I go and I walk down the hallway, and then somebody pulls me over in the hallway, and he starts talking to me. And it was a guy who I'd known, grew up in a lot more of a conservative background than I did, and he'd been going to church for his whole life. And he started telling me about how, like, he wasn't sure if he, like, agreed with what we were doing, and he didn't know if biblically he could stand behind the things that were going on this day. And this just sent me into just pure fury. Like, I just wanted to just punch that guy right in the face. And what happened was I went out later that day after church with some friends of mine, and we're all sitting around and we're talking about this, and then I just start going on a rant about like how like that's not acceptable, and I can't believe that there is bigotry in the church, and I can't believe this guy is saying this. And then I come up with this idea that's like, if we all close our eyes and then all the people who feel like that put their hands up, we can send them away to an island. And then it was a very Hitler-esque idea that I had for all the bigots of the world. And I'm going through this whole rant, and then I was sitting across from a friend of mine, Shannon. And Shannon was a gay guy, and he went to church with me. And he said, well, if 5 years ago we would have done something like that, I would have been sent out of the church. Because apparently Shannon, 5 years ago, wasn't comfortable with his sexuality, and he didn't know where to stand and how to express himself in that way. And he would have been against homosexuality 5 years ago, and now he is a gay man. So this just blew my mind like right out of my own skull, you know? Because it was like, oh, that's like the crazy thing about what we're all doing here. And this thing is like, I was the asshole in this situation. You know what I mean? Like, I was the one who was being ignorant towards another person. And listening to Shannon tell me that was like, oh, the like crazy thing about this whole Christianity thing is like, you can't just love people on this side. You have to like also love people on this side. And then it was one of the most amazing things that I've ever learned. And I didn't like convert there or anything like that, but it started a really long journey of me of being involved in this community. And then last April, I got baptized, and I was so thankful for this gathering of people, and that they could show me ways to love people that I never imagined before to be possible. And that's my story of gathering. So thank you very much for listening to that. Have a good night.